رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما. So we're continuing a discussion from last week where we're reading the 32nd word, and essentially we're trying to figure out the proof for, as Nursi says, for La Sharika Lahu. So any volunteers to summarize last week's discussion? Who has the second mic? So I could pick a volunteer at this point. Do you want to summarize last week's discussion? Okay.
So I think last week was sort of a repeat of the week before, except this time instead of talking to a small particle, we were talking to a red blood cell. And I guess the only thing that I want to say is that I think Yusuf said we should draw a parallel to what we're doing over here, to what Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam did with the idols, where he broke the idols and then he placed the axe in the big idol's hands. And then people were like, oh, the big idol can't do this because he's incapable of like walking or like swinging the axe. And over here, we're doing the same thing because, you know, we attribute all of these things to nature. And over here, we're having these discussions and saying that nature isn't capable of all those things that we attribute to it. That's all I have to say.
Jazakallah khair. Anyone else? Very kind. You want to say something?
Oh, one thing stayed with me from last week. We also discussed why and how and why the author is talking about different levels, like in a hierarchy, as if starting from the smallest particle, the smallest thing that you can think of, not necessarily, you know, in sciences. Smallest thing that you can think of, and then going gradually bigger and bigger in the scale, not the size necessarily. And we said this is also kind of how we act in real life as well. We usually first try to claim, and when I say claim, it's not necessarily I, it's about we. Like whether we can explain one thing or another. So we usually think that we can explain everything, and because we can explain the basis of everything, like a particle, what things are made of. We can explain them, they happen themselves or under some, let's say, natural laws, or some, you know, the societal norms, depending on, again, what particle represent. Sometimes it represents the individual or person, right? So we think that the person is governed by, let's say, some societal or biological laws. But then in practice, we realize that this is not easy to do. It's not easy to explain everything, the basis of everything. And we say that, okay, at least I can explain how family, for instance, if we start from the individual, we say explain how families operate. Okay, we can say that they operate because there are such, you know, the causes, interference of the parents or the others, you know, the relatives and so on. We try to come up with some rules. And when we fail, we say, okay, at least we can explain, you know, how nations operate, how humanity as a whole operates, and so on, right? So this is I would say, occurring theme in any sciences, any let's say, intellectual activity. If you are familiar with, which reminded me, a set of novels, Foundation. Anybody heard the Foundation series? Yeah, it's about the made up the science called psychohistory. Okay? The guy invents a mathematical model to explain the movement of crowds. And he says, of course, we cannot explain the individuals, but with this theory, we can explain how, the crowds, or like a big crowds, like billions of people, how they move and so on. That's the series is about that, the novel. Anyway, so this is a recurring theme in sciences and the way we live our lives. This is the hierarchy.
Jazakallah khair. I think one comment that stayed with me from last week is Sister Aisha Noor's comment, where she said, the attitude that we learn from this is we need to enter into a conversation with things that we see. For example, the author here first speaks through, like in this example, the person first enters into a conversation with the particle that he observes, tries to explain that, then with the red blood cell, then eventually with the human body. So I really like the comment of like entering into a conversation of things that we interact with and we see, we're trying to explain. Does anyone else have anything else to say? If not, then I think we can continue reading. And we're starting reading from the footnote, the third footnote in my book. It's the first footnote in the other book. So Atiq, do you want to continue reading?
Is it the all-wise maker?
Yes, that's the footnote.
So page 637 in my book, footnote. The all-wise maker has created the human body as though it was a well-arranged city. A number of the blood vessels perform the duties of telephones and telegraphs, while others of them are like pipes from a fountain through which blood, which is the water of life, flows. As for blood, created within it are two sorts of corpuscles. One of them, known as red corpuscles, distributes nutrients to the cells of the body. It conveys sustenance to the cells according to a divine law, like merchants and food officials. The other sort are white corpuscles, which are fewer in number than the former. Their duty, like soldiers, is defense against enemies such as illness. Whenever they undertake that defense with their two revolutions, like Mawlawi dervishes, they take on a swift and wonderful state. As for blood as a whole, it has two general duties. The first is to repair damage done to the body. There are two sorts of blood vessels, veins and arteries. One of these carry purified blood. They are the channels through which alien blood is conveyed. The other are the channels for the turbid blood, which collects the waste matter. These convey the blood to where breathing occurs, that is, the lungs. The all-wise maker created in the air two elements, nitrogen and oxygen. As for oxygen, when it comes into contact with the blood and breathing, it draws to itself like amber. It draws to itself like amber the impure element carbon, which is polluting the blood. The two combine and are transformed into matter called carbonic acid gas. Oxygen also maintains the body temperature and purifies the blood. This is because in the science of chemistry, the all-wise maker bestowed on oxygen and carbon an intense relationship, which might be described as chemical passion, whereby, according to this divine law, when those two elements come close to each other, they combine. It has been established by science that heat is produced by combining, because it is a sort of combustion. The wisdom in this is as follows. The motion of the particles of those two elements is different. On combining, the particles of one element unite with those of the other, each two particles thereafter moving like a single particle. The other motion is transformed into heat according to a law of the all-wise maker. As a matter of fact, motion produces heat is an established principle. Thus, as a consequence of this fact, by this chemical combination, as carbon is removed from the blood, the body temperature of human beings is maintained, and at the same time, the blood is purified. On inhaling oxygen, both cleanses the body's water of life and kindles the fire of life. On exhaling, it yields in the mouth the fruit of words, which are miracles of divine power. Glory be unto him at whose art the mind is bewildered. You want me to continue?
Yeah, I think you can continue reading for now.
Sure. So I'll start with the whole page, that little section. The red corpuscles bring my food, while the white ones combat illnesses which attack me. I have work to do. Do not distract me. Anyway, an impotent, lifeless, deaf and blind thing like you cannot in any way interfere with us, for we have such an exact, subtle, and faultless order that if the one who has authority over us was not absolutely wise, absolutely powerful, and absolutely knowing, our order would be broken and our regularity spoiled. Then the one making the claims despaired of it too. He encountered the body of a human being and said to it, once again, as the naturalists say, in the language of blind nature and aimless philosophy, you are mine, it is I who made you, or anyway, I have a share in you. The human body answered with the tongue of reality and wisdom and through the eloquence of its order. If you possess the power and knowledge to have actual control over the bodies of all human beings who are the same as me, and on whose faces are the stamp of power and seal of creation, which are the same, and if you have the wealth and jurisdiction to own, from water and air to plants and animals, the treasuries of my sustenance, and if you have infinite power and boundless wisdom, with which to employ me with perfect wisdom and cause me to perform my worship, and the power and wisdom to lodge in a narrow, lowly vessel like me, immaterial and subtle faculties like the spirit, heart, and intellect, which are extremely vast and exalted, and for which I am merely the sheath. Then demonstrate all these and afterwards say that you made me. Otherwise, be silent. Moreover, according to the testimony of the perfect order in my body and the indication of the stamp of unity on my face, my maker is one who is so powerful over all things, knows all things, and sees and hears all things. Someone aimless and impotent like you cannot meddle in his art. You cannot interfere in so much as an atom. The representative of the things imagined to be God's partners could find no way in which to interfere in the body, so he went off. Next, he encountered the human race and said to himself, this is a disorganized and unruly group. Perhaps, like Satan interferes in their individual and social action, which they perform through the exercise of their wills. I'll be able to find some way to interfere in the functioning of their bodies and natures, and then finding some way, I'll be able to exercise control over the body and the body's cells, which sent me packing. So he said to the human race once again in the language of deaf nature and aimless philosophy, you seem to be in great confusion. I am your master and owner, or at least I partly own you, to which the human race answered through the tongue of truth and reality, wisdom and order. If you possess the power and wisdom to make the shirt that clothes the whole globe of the earth and is woven and sewn with perfect wisdom from the multicolored threads of all the hundreds of thousands of animal and plant species of which we are one, and to make the carpet which is spread over the face of the earth and is woven from the hundreds of thousands of species of animate beings and is created in an extremely fine and ornamented fashion, and to continuously renew and refurbish it. And if you possess power and all-embracing wisdom with which to have free disposal over the globe of the earth, of which we are the fruit, and over the universe, of which we are the seed, and to send us our vital necessities from all the regions of the cosmos with the balance of wisdom, and if you have the ability to create all those like us who have gone before us and those who will come after us, on whose faces the stamp of power is the same, then perhaps you can claim to have mastery over me.
Jazakallah, I think we can stop there.
Already.
So I guess I'll start us off with the first question that came to my mind is, Please. Jazakallah khair.
This was off.
The whole time?
Just that last. No, not the.
Weird.
So I guess I'll start us off. I have the first question. So where it says, who are the same as me and on whose faces are the stamp of power and the seal of creation, which are the same. What does it mean by the stamp of power on the faces and then seal of creation? So in the very first paragraph that we read, it's if you possess the power and knowledge to have actual control over the bodies of all human beings, who are the same as me and whose faces are the stamp of power and seal of creation. So on whose face are the stamp of power and the seal of creation? What does that mean?
I mean, nothing special. I will say it's like I will just expand the sentence without explaining. What I understand is if you look at them, if you look at the human bodies, you will see the signs of a power and the seal of creation, which are the same. So you will see that the way they are created coming from the same source, seal of the creation, which are the same. It's like it's the same artist has a signature on them. You will see that, he says.
So anyone with first initial comments on what we read? Questions, thoughts? Yes, please.
So this is going to be a recurring theme, but the author is making some, I would say, basic observations, such as, like, look at everybody's face. So we do see that there is a common stamp, because the stamp is common across, like, I don't know, in US dollar. So when you see a US dollar, US dollars are all the same because they are being stamped by the same central bank and whatnot. So a stamp of power in the faces is, when you look at humans' creation, and especially is emphasizing the face. So you see that there are two eyes, a nose, ears. So it is this, they are coming from, if you like, the same factory. So the author in here is highlighting that this points to the fact that they are coming from a single source. The maker is the same. Yet at the same time, all the faces are different. So they are the same, yet they are all different. So them having the same features is indicative of the source being the same. Yet no two faces being the same is meaning that whomever painted this face is also the painter of the other face, so that he made a difference. Like my face is given unique to me, Abdurrahman's face is given unique to him, which is another stamp of oneness of the creator. So that sort of a pattern is author is doing. And as we have been studying this text for 3 weeks now, so at every layer that he is mentioning, he introduces a new evidence. It's not like he is simply saying, go and capture the lower, go and capture the upper, then capture me. But he's also introducing, at every layer of existence, you see a different evidences and stamps, as he is using stamp here, for oneness of the creator. And an all-powerful, all-wise maker has to be acting in here, because I do see manifestation of an all-encompassing knowledge. And in this context, the example for that is everybody having unique faces, yet everybody's faces being commonly a face with the eyes and nose and everything. So two different stems in this sense, just on this, I don't know how many centimeter square. So that much of a space had become a seal of oneness of the creator. If you would like to take it, although the author is not mentioning it here, you can talk about the same for fingerprints. So in that much of a space, the maker puts unique stamps of saying that, oh, I am the maker of Yusuf and Abdurrahman and everybody else, so much so that I put a unique stamp of me. I didn't paint the same painting twice. So this is a sign of oneness.
So I think I do understand that point. Because like if you look at the human face, you do see like a power there. And if you look at like how every person's face is like the same in some way, you do see the seal of creation. But what I'm having trouble with in the next paragraph is the stamp of unity on my face. Can we go over how, like, looking at your face, you can like verify that there is a stamp of unity there? Okay. I mean, yeah, because that points to an order, I guess. But like when I think of unity, I'm thinking like unity with the rest of the creation. Because like that's what it says later in the sentence, like the indication of the stamp of unity on my face, my maker is the one who is powerful over all things, knows all things, and sees and hears all things. So yeah, I just want to know like how you can sort of like think of that by just like thinking about the face, the human face.
Good, Karen, please.
So the way I understand is that when he talks about the stamp of unity, is if you look at the human face, and I mean you can take it literally, the human face, or whatever comes to your mind when I say human face. You will say, I guess this using the same logic here, you will see how things are related to the rest of the universe. So the interesting part, I guess, like it kind of, after all these weeks' discussions, it's kind of, I guess, easier to see that whoever created this face must be creating the other faces as well, must be creating the other things, that everything that my face interact with and so on. The interesting part, I guess, he talks about seeing, hearing, and so on. And I guess the idea here that you experience the seeing in you. So when I say human face, it also includes human eyes and human ear, right? Whoever created this experience that I have, that I call as seeing, right? So the source of this experience must be seeing, in the sense that he's the source of seeing that I experience. So I'm not trying to imagine a God that he sees things, but it's more like whoever made this computer knows about computers, right? So whoever made this computer, the laptop, he knows about the touch, for instance, because there are buttons. So when I say that, I don't necessarily think that the maker is touching something, right? I just know that he knows about the touching, whatever I mean with that, it's coming from the maker. So the same way he sees, meaning every time I think about a seeing event in this life, I know that it is coming from him. The same way the hearing, whatever I mean with the hearing, whatever I experience with when I hear, I know that it's coming from him. So that's what I mean, what I understand from when he says knows all things and sees and hears all things. Because when we reach the human level, now the number of names that we are exposed to increased when compared to a particle. With particle, for instance, when we study particle, there's no example of seeing or hearing from our perspective, at least. So when I look at the stone, for instance, I don't say that, oh, the creator must be seeing or hearing. I can. Like if I study stone, a rock within the universe as a whole, I can say that, but not, let's say, as quick as I would do when I study human being. So I said, look at her or look at him, he can seize. So his engineer must be seeing. That's what I understand here. I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
So about the footnote that we read. So this is like a challenge to our brother Yusuf. He loves talking about the causality. So how it is different when Nursi talks about, all these causal relationships. He talks about this molecule coming together with that molecule. And he says it is established by science that, the motion transfers into heat and so on and so forth. Why there is no problem there? When Zarar says, but we know that, I push a rock, it would move. Or when he says, we know that the hydrogen and oxygen comes together and makes water, we will, get angry with Zarar. What happens, when we read it in the text? So that's my question.
Brother Yusuf.
So I think the author put a lot of reminders to the beginning and to the end to give us a context. And I was looking for the very last statement that he makes, فَسُبْحَانَ مَنْ تَحَيَّرَ فِي صُنْعِ الْعُقُولِ, and the translation was given, glory be unto him at whose art the mind is bewildered. So what he is saying in here was in bewilderment or hayra. So there's the supplication of the Prophet ﷺ, Allah increase me in hayra, in bewilderment, when I look at the existence. So author, by counting all these things, was bewildered, was in surprise, apparently, that he concluded with the statement of the existence. So I was thinking about it. Am I really surprised when I look at what he explained in this paragraph with oxygen behaving like this, or the cells behaving like that in the blood, those two entities, one is for feeding the cell, the body, the other one for having a fight with the the microbes and whatnot. So as if seeing it in this pretty much like a country, if you like, that sort of a pattern is going on in there, a behavior is going in there. Like, for instance, if I see Ali right now to start making a comment about what we are saying, I would be bewildered and I would be super surprised, because I wouldn't expect him to do such a thing. I know he is just he can barely talk a few words. If he were to make a very precise comment about what we are doing over here, I would be super surprised.
I'm calm.
Be thankful. So, but as if the author is saying, since as we have been studying, this is the thing that we observe by blood cells and oxygen and everything, that much job is being done in there, which requires a lot of knowledge and skill. And our Ali doesn't have any of these skills. This is why I will be bewildered. But do you expect the blood cells or the oxygen and hydrogen to have any of these? We don't. Actually, we don't think that they have any of those skills, but they do all these jobs. So why am I not being bewildered is the question that comes to my mind. And the author in here, by stating that this is happening, that's happening, and in between he is talking about the creator does it this way, that way, occasionally, but he's not disrupting every sentence with that, but putting those reminders. But by concluding with this statement, as if it is saying that, look, all this is happening within that order, and that much of knowledge is at play. You do observe the manifestation of this knowledge. Either you will say that particle knows this, cells know that. I mean, all these are knowingly doing this action. If not, you should be bewildered. How come? Like, how is it really happening? Like all this, then you would say, well, this is sooner of the creator. This is the artwork of someone to whose artwork I'm really bewildered and say, this is magnificent. This should be my reaction. So by reading it like this, actually, author gives us a very good example of how to read creation. Or if you like, how to reinterpret our scientific observation. Because science does what? Science is observing the existence. And this is good. This is something we should do. Because Quran is inviting us to look at the artwork of the creator. فَانْظُرْ إِلَىٰ آثَارِ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ كَيْفَ يُحْيِي الْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا. Quran is inviting us. Look at the artwork, آثَارِ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ, artwork of mercy of Allah, how he creates life after death. So we are being invited, and scientists are doing that. We should be doing that. But how shall we be doing that? By referring back to, I mean, once I see it, I should be bewildered, first of all. Like, this is magnificent. A lot of things are going on in here, but apparently the apparent agents in here is, as he has been talking about, red blood corpuscle, or the white blood cells. I mean, these are not intellectual, unconscious beings, yet a lot of conscious acts are coming out at their hand. Therefore, they are being occupied, they are being employed by an all-knowing, all-merciful, all-caring one. They are not acting by themselves. They are just as if moving. The one who creates them is moving them right there. It's not even that he gave them qualities and then they are now acting, because it doesn't make any sense to even think it like that. So I guess, in a nutshell, being really bewildered by that, and this bewilderment, this surprise, should take me to saying that there must be an all-knowledgeable one. It cannot happen otherwise. So in this sense, this is a nice alternative way of making science, I would say. Still, you observe creation, but your conclusion is being surprised and attributing it to its true source, rather than saying that it happens. Because it happens implies as if it happens by itself, it happens by chance, it happens by law, it happens, like, how does it happen? So I think this is a good example in this sense.
Jazakallah khair. Please.
Just to follow up of your last statement. So what do you say about the statement that it's all by chance? Is it viable by chance? Can you elaborate on that?
I mean, if you want to say no, you can say no.
I mean, for the chance part of it, so I never take it serious for the chance part of it, because if I wake up one day and I see that my car has a scar on it which writes Yusuf in there, I would get mad for sure, because deliberately somebody has written my name over the car with a key, like just scratching the surface, probably Birkan. Like somebody, I would say, who knows that the car is mine, knows my name, and is angry with me and wanted to take revenge from me by scratching my car with my name. So multiple things are here. I can never, like knowledge is there for sure. Hatred is there, some feelings, and somebody who has the power to do this and everything. So if police comes and says, well, it looks like by chance, it's by wind or something, so I say, come on. And this is something as simple as scratching my car. I'm not talking about making of life or even like making a car. It's just scratching a car. So we are talking about human. I am being made right now. It's not like I was made billions of years ago. No, right now I ate something and like this boy is growing. As this boy is growing, I am also changing moment by moment. I am being made. So saying that it's chance sounds so nonsense to me, really, in this sense, because every moment I am being made. Every moment is a new being, and I am being made because there's this constant change. So chance is really, I would say, the most flimsy claim for explaining the existence itself.
So I'd like to go back to the footnote, something that I realized, especially while listening to Yusuf, when authors look at the events. So when we explain things, there are different ways, right? Different ways we approach. The one way is describing what happens. So this happens and then that happens, these two come together and this happens and so on. This is the description, which is like if you don't have any problem with your eyes or the instrument that you use, usually true, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Like if it is true, it is true. Like you cannot discuss against that. Like if I say I have a laptop here, there's a laptop here. That's it. An author does that. Author describes. Imam Nur says, you know, this happens and then that happens. These two come together. So what happened next? He observes this and then say, oh, because all-powerful one does this or does that. Like it's not like a, just inserting a name of Allah there to make things religious. He says, when I look at these events, the description I just shared, I see power there. And you will also see that. Okay? And everybody sees that. So the question is, where do you attribute this power? Okay? So for instance, I think I shared this before. I was reading about an experiment in a study. They see some stuff about cells and so on, doesn't matter, the details. And they see the power there, okay? The researchers. And they concluded as the natural selection must be so powerful. That's their sentence. Okay? So the question is not what you see. The question is whom or where do you attribute what you see, what quality you see there. The power is there. Power is visible. And so because he questions all these in the main text, he's not repeating in the, the footnote, the methodology, he asks the question whether this atom or the molecule can have this power or not, whether the relationship between them can have the power or not, whether so-called laws, these abstract things that don't even exist in a, the actual sense, have any power or not. And he says, because they cannot, whoever creates them, whoever creates this event that I just described, must be all powerful. So that's the differentiating thing between Imam Nursi and Zarar when he says, we all see that the hydrogen and oxygen comes together and makes water. So it's not just a description when Zarar says it. I mean, I'm just using your name. When Zarar says, it's more like, I see this event And I think whatever quality I see there, I attribute them to water molecule or the hydrogen or oxygen. That's what Zaras does. But the author says, no, you cannot do that. So you have to attribute the quality you see there to the actual source. That's one difference I see. The other one, which is very interesting, when he talks about the laws, he talks about the laws, right? He says divine laws. But the interesting, he says, these carry sustenance to the cell as a divine law. You would remember last week we discussed, like if we gave an example that a child asking something from the father, and every time child asks, father gives. So Zarar calls it as a law of, the sound waves and some mechanical movements, but Qadir calls it as the law of mercy. So it's a law, but it's a law of mercy. The author says it's a law of sustenance. There is a law there. There's a divine law, but it's a law of sustenance. Another law, it's the law of protection. Some particles or some blood cells protecting body from this based on some laws, rules, he says. So implicitly said, he referring to a divine law of protection. So that's another difference. Again, the difference does not stem from the descriptions. Descriptions is everything, everybody agrees what happens. And also, this is only reflects his, the scientific knowledge, the authors, right? It must be even wrong, like the description. We might be even seeing something different now when we look closer. Let's say, maybe red blood cells are not protecting body. Who cares? Something else would be protecting body because there's a law of protection in the universe. So you will find another, let's say, the element in your body that represent this law. So that's another, I would say, difference. And as Yusuf said, this is like a very good, that's the reason I highlighted this footnote. That's a really beautiful example of, how and where we should be standing. Because like many people here in this room, studying one way or another, universities and so on, or, been through universities. So we sometimes having this tension, right? All interpretations and so on being so, I would say, childish and stupid. So we say that, I cannot be part of this. But the author says, forget about the interpretations, look at the descriptions. To the extent what you study helps you better see the universe, study it. Just seeing it, right? It will help you better see the events. But understanding part, you have to do it yourself. You cannot rely on so-called professors that make their own childish interpretations. Natural selection should be so powerful. What do you mean with that? Like, natural selection is an abstract entity. How something in our my mind, even if there is such a, let's say, a rule, how it can have any power? Like, you are not a poet. You cannot put these words together randomly. You cannot think, like say things like, there's this oxymoron phrases in Turkish. I'm trying to find Yusuf, sessizliğin çığlığı, we say sometimes. Scream of silence. Yes, a scream of silence, right? Yeah. You cannot say such things. I mean, a poet can say that. A philosopher can say that, right? But you cannot. And you cannot call yourself scientist after that. So author is saying that, okay, the interpretation part, understanding part, you have to do it yourself, unfortunately. You won't find much help there. But the description, if it is good, it is good. If it is true, it is true. And there's no reason to fight against it.
I just have a short question kind of on the name that Nusi uses, as in calling it a divine law. How is that not a top-down approach? As in, he observes a law and he says this is like a divine law. Like instead of calling it, let's say, law of mechanics, just call it law of Rahman, but what difference does that make? Like, how is that not a top-down approach?
I mean, just maybe a short answer, just because I have the microphone. I think the author here is sharing his conclusion. It's not the starting point. He says, when I look at this, just like he didn't, clearly write down the methodology, he doesn't say in the footnote, for instance, is these red blood cells have this power or not? He does not question, right? But we know it from the rest of the text. So the same way, I guess, he's not explicitly saying that I came up to this conclusion that there must be a divine law, but he's sharing his conclusions. That's what I understand.
I actually thought divine law was just like what he was calling like all the laws that we like sort of do understand, like gravity, mechanics, but like, so he's like not denying that there is an order, but instead of like calling it gravity or law of mechanics, he just calls it divine law. Like he's naming that order divine law. I actually thought it was important because like the point is not to just be like, oh, there is no gravity or there is not, it's all just, it's like, no, like Allah controls everything, but he does have an order and he does have a law that he has imposed. So I don't know. That was just what I thought, but I don't know if that's like the right way of thinking about it.
So I think the distinction in there is, again, we can even interpret what a proper way of calling it divine law and improper way of calling it divine law. So our previous example was, let's say I observe that Zarar is waking up at a certain time of day, let's say 5 a.m., then doing the prayer, then doing a run, come back, take a shower, have a breakfast, go to work. And he has the same routine for 15, 20 years, let's say. And I call it law of Zarar. So that can be understood in two ways. One is there is an external thing which forces Zarar to act in this way. The other one is this is Zarar's way of acting, but he is very consistently acting in this way. So he is imposing this on himself in a sense. And he can break that at any time he wants because nothing is imposing this on him. But there's this consistent pattern as an outside observer that I can say about Zarar. So when we talk about a law of mercy, a law of like a divine law in this sense, how do we get to that conclusion? We do observe the creator acting in a consistent pattern in existence. So the author says, yes, it's a law, but the law is how the creator is acting, how he is willing. And this what the wrong way to take it is as if something or somebody is imposing a law on him, or another way to wrongfully take this law is there's this abstract law exists somewhere out there, which is called gravity. And then the law itself is pulling the things down and whatnot, which is another wrong way to take it. But if you take it as a divine law, the proper way to see it is, in my experience, I do observe this consistent pattern in the existence. So the creator is acting in this way. So it's a law to indicate its consistency and wisdom, but it is actually, each law is what? It is the will of the creator. That's what it is. So otherwise it's not to imagine, because some people, some interesting people would talk about existence as self-realization of the creator and whatnot, or as if something is imposing the creator. In the past, some philosophers came with such ideas. So there are, of course, many weird ways of interpreting this law of divine as well. But as the author is now presenting us the idea, I think this is what it should be, as I understood from the context.
To me, when I see such a phrase like a divine law, I think it's more than who imposes what or what imposes on what. It's more about the will. So when I say divine law, it means somebody must be choosing it happen this way. And even in this choosing the will, I will see an order. So we say everything in the universe is so intermingled, right? We see the same structure when we study the qualities that we observe in the universe. When I see will, for instance, in the universe, I see an order in this will as well. So the quality of order, quality of will, quality of power, they are all intermingled. So divine law of part looks at me. Like I see it as law in the sense that I cannot get out of it. But what I observe there, it's a will. Somebody will it this way. And there's again, the consistent order in the willing.
I guess that becomes so. In this case, when the person is talking to them in the voice, as naturalists say, in the language of blind nature and most philosophy, and he's obviously talking about the human body, so DNA comes to my mind, like as in DNA is saying that I, the one that controls, and obviously it goes on to talk about the faces and the features. Like I understand how that works with gravity because like that is a concept to explain. It is an arbitrary, imaginary thing. But DNA is at least physical, real, tangible. And then we do observe changes, like, for example, Abdurrahman's face versus Parker's face. You could like, at least where we stand now with like we've like mapped out the entire genomes and then gene editing. Now we have CRISPR in play as well. So how do I understand, like, especially for the first line, if you possess the power and knowledge, like I do observe this power and knowledge within DNA to cause these changes. As in, I see different DNA doing something different. So maybe we can talk about difference in power, but at least I do see the knowledge there.
Do you see the knowledge and power within DNA, or do you see knowledge and power when you study DNA?
Well, I have DNA. I see difference in DNA.
Yes. So no, what I mean, so the one thing is I see power in DNA versus I see power when I study DNA.
But it's like instinctively want to see power in DNA. But when DNA does change, so it's like everything comes from number one part of one DNA base, DNA tries to get in this one. Like my instinctive reaction first needs to say yes. When DNA does this, because that's the only thing standing there. And it's not like gravity or something, it is something physical that I can't even see, observe the results. So how do we like really solve that conundrum?
If it's about like if it's the DNA so powerful, then why would you when you extract DNA and it's in a tube, it cannot do anything. It's just like any other chemical compound. It doesn't have any enzymatic activity. It cannot do anything. It cannot replicate on its own. It cannot be transcribed on its own. It cannot be transformed on its own. Nothing. It's useless. DNA is powerful in the environment it is in. So the way how everything is functioning together in a cell, in a proteins, everything that is powerful. Like as you said, the mechanism itself is powerful, how it's being controlled. But DNA by itself, it cannot do anything.
That was so harsh.
Your DNA must be nothing.
So DNA, we call it the DNA, but DNA is not a single entity. Like it is made up of multiple things. So DNA is, if you like, the persona. We assume that these multiple entities, when they get together, that they manifest. So my question is there really a entity as DNA, or we are imagining a collective personality for that many particles that are now together? Like, for example, for this place, we call it a house. But is this a house, or is it just a many, bricks and everything put together, and you call it a house? Otherwise, it's just a pile of bricks. Like in your understanding, your perception, the way you interpret here is a house, because you're imagining a collective personality, if you like, for this way of seeing this house. This is why attributing actions to compounds sounds a little weird to me. This is why the way authors started makes a lot of sense, starting from particle. Because a DNA is a bunch of particles. Zarar is another bunch of particles. So when I say zarar, I am actually knowing that there is more to this particle soup I see over there than the particles, which I call as zarar. So actually, when we say DNA does something, unintentionally, maybe we are imagining something similar, as if some sort of a soul or a persona we imagine in the DNA. But if you are thinking about it exclusively from a materialist point of view, there's no DNA per se. DNA, what you call as DNA, is a bunch of particles. So it's not a single thing, it's a compound, which means, which takes us back to the very beginning of this discussion, every particle is individually, now in a DNA, you have, I don't know how many thousand or million, whatever particles in a DNA. Now they are getting together as a collective, if you like, army of particles. They're aiming to make eventually somebody called zarar. So this is why DNA is, we impose an understanding over a bunch of particles. So there's no even point of discussing, could DNA do something? Well, could a particle do something is a prior question that we need to answer. This is why authors started from there, and then saying that if you cannot explain it, then, so the same thing, you see the same pattern is happening. And even now I'm thinking, why is he bringing up the topic of human body? Actually, exactly what he says in here is happening. Like I remember a friend of mine in high school, he used to say, well, if God creates human body, how about this appendix of human? You see, there seems to be some room for chance or something, because it's a useless part of human body and you cannot explain its purposeless or whatever. So if, as you claim, there's an all-wise maker who creates human body, how about this appendix? So this is exactly what's, in a figurative way, the representative of unbelief says. Either I have a control over you, or human body, meaning you happen by chance, by this or that, or I have a share in you, which means I mess up with some portions of you, such as human appendix, let's say, and you wouldn't be able to explain it with anything else. I am the cause of this part, human appendix, which humans do not have any explanation, a wise explanation why the heck it is standing in there, sort of a thing. And then author's response to that is, I mean, look at the order everywhere. Can you explain that order portion without like diverting my attention to anywhere else? You do see all these order. Can you meddle your finger to that order at all? Is the author's response.
Question? Yes, please.
Also, the other part of the equation, like we can say things about the DNA, insulted and so on, but when we look at what's happening, so one thing that the author keeps repeating is that when you say he does this, author says, let's look at this, like what it does. Okay, it transcribes something, or it produces, let's say, a protein, whatever. Author says, well, if you look at it, you will see that it's not just a tiny thing. You will see that it is connected to the entire body. So if you're talking about the knowledge, for instance, and if you want to attribute it to the DNA, you have to attribute a knowledge of knowing the entire human body. And then it doesn't stop there, because you will see the unity in every human body. So it's as if the DNA in me knows about the rest of the humans as well, because doing the same thing with other DNAs and so on. So you have to attribute a knowledge which encompasses the entire human race. It doesn't stop there too, because we know the relationship between, the different species and so on and so forth. So this knowledge getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you will need to say that my DNA, I will probably say that my DNA has the all-encompassing knowledge of the universe, of the history, not even just the universe in this very moment, universe in the entire history of time that it needs to know. So that's kind of knowledge you are trying to attribute to this entity. Same goes with the powers. Same goes with the will. Same goes with the beauty. All of them would be so encompassing. And then as you go upper levels, when you look at the human face and so on, you will see that the source is also all seeing and all know, like a hearing, as we discussed. You have to go back and say that, you know what? My DNA also all seeing and all hearing. Because this is what I see in the upper level that this DNA has the knowledge of. So it never stops there. When you start attributing a tiny power to things, you will necessarily end up with attributing godship to these things. And if you can do that, yeah, then your DNA does it.
This might take us off topic, but there's an interesting line in the reading. It says, perhaps like Satan interferes in their individual and social actions, which they perform through the exercise of their wills, I'll be able to find some way to interfere. Obviously, this person has been saying everything wrong, so I don't know if I take that statement to be correct or not, but still thought it was interesting. Like Satan interferes in their individual and social actions, which they perform through the exercise of their wills. So yeah, we talked about this at Drexel a bit, like what Satan is, but it's like just if you could dive in a bit into this. And I'm like, for this specifically, I'm looking at Brother Yusuf. Please.
Yeah, that's what I thought differed like this from the two things that we read earlier. Because now like it's looking to like why things feel like they can interfere. So the first thing is like, oh, just because you see Satan interfering, like this thing feels like it can perhaps also do the same thing. But also in the last paragraph, it says in the second line, do not say that seeing confusion in my species, you will be able to interfere in some way. So those are the two things. That the first thing is that Satan interferes, so I can interfere. And the second thing is I see confusion. So perhaps, like there is some way to interfere.
I guess since this is a metaphor of reality, so I'm trying to see what could author mean by this. Like, as I said, for the body, maybe at the level of body, some evolutionary biologist would say that, well, forget about the DNA level and whatnot at the level of human body, how about appendix? So this could be one such claims. And now, as if we are moving from the domain of biology to human as a species, and the person is as if saying that at the level of those people, like human species, what sort of a claim is out there? I don't know if he is here referring to some social science where it is saying that within humanity we do observe all these different traits in terms of their behavior. Not, I mean, biology. We can speculate about its biological basis and whatnot, but let's say Turks are like this, Pakistanis are like that, and then such and such African tribes are like this and what. So as if this, at that level, there is some room for chance or some, I can come up with an explanation which alludes to it happens by itself. It is, I even heard about some people talking about genes of nations to make some comments about, I mean, you are white skin because of your genes, let's say. A similar analogy to be made for, or as a nation, Turks are like that, and then start making some comments about it, as if the author in here is saying that at that level, is it again, can be explained by chance, by nature, by laws, or at that level also it is explained, can only be explained by an all-knowing creator. And the comment that you mentioned, so since humans in their behavior, Satan is meddling with them, as if saying that in there is room for, as if some interference other than the creator sort of a thing. So the hope in here, I guess, is, can we talk about say Zarar or Pakistanis behaving in this way because of, I don't know, chance, or can we come up with a different level of explanation? So I don't know if this is I don't feel like it's a good answer to what you asked, but I'm guessing that sort of a thing is going on in here. But maybe if you know any more, heard any scientific claims like this, it might be more helpful.
Something claim like that? What?
Like at society level, we come up with a law or explanation for why this is happening. Like what is author refuting in here? If you heard anything of that sort.
Yeah, I heard a few. So that's interesting, actually. The order, when you look at it, it also perfectly reflects the kind of, I would say, the history. So it always starts with, at least, in our timeline, it started with the particles, like the physics was the main science at that time. I mean, you may not remember, of course, due to your age, but people would talk about the physics only. The rest, it was just, the other sciences. The physicists were the main guys and so on. And they would explain everything. And of course, they failed. And then the biology was the main science. And everybody would respect the biologists, and the other sciences around them, the cells and so on. Nowadays, the most respected the science is around the psychology and the related things, studying the human being. The next will be, of course, the sociology, and other stuff. But that's really interesting. This is how human mind works when trying to conquer the universe. Like you first claim that on the basis of everything, we can just can find some natural laws or chances and so on. And when you see that there's a perfect order there, you cannot attribute all this power, knowledge, and so on just to a tiny particle and so on. You go to the upper levels, and with this, the Satan part I don't know what order exactly means, but I think the emphasis here is the disorganized. So when I look at the humans, I see a lot of room for not being perfectly orderly. Like I can find an element that has only tiny amount of knowledge and the power, then I will say that, you know what, this element does it itself, because all it needs only a tiny part of knowledge. So the same way it says that, okay, I'm looking for a disorganization. And then the other part is exercise, through the exercise of their wills. So when we look at the human beings also, there's the element of will. So you can say that this thing doesn't, let's say move by itself. But when it comes to Qadir, it is easier to say that. I mean, what God, he chooses, we say. Right? So there is, let's say, room for shirk there. The moment we see disorganized, the elements, we see that there's a room for shirk there, room for partnership, because disorganization means a clash of forces. Before that, it was all about the unity, right? It's coming from the same source. But when we look at the human society, it's obviously a clash of forces, clash of nations, clash of cultures. What is it? The clash of something? Civilizations. Yeah. You reading it? Oh, okay. No. I was referring to. Okay, I was referring to something intellectual. Sorry. Not okay. So yeah, that's how we read it. Clash of something, right? And when we refer to clash, it means multiple things in it at play. There's a room for shirk. I guess that's what author means here.
So I also understood part of your question to be about how should we understand what satanic interference means in our life, right? And one way, I guess, I think Brother Yusuf and Brother Rikan have kind of gone into more of like the sort of contextual argument that Imam Nursi is making, but just in terms of how we can understand Satan, right? Because I think that's an important question is, sometimes we'll have something like, what is 1 + 1? What does it equal? And when I look at that, what I observe is 2. Yeah. But if I have a thought, or let's say a whispering that says, but what if it's 3? Right? That would be what I would call a satanic interference, right? That which represents something, an alternative that has no basis in reality or truth or in what I actually observe or witness in the world. So I can look at the function of DNA or something else, and I can say, oh, this has no ownership over the qualities that it exhibits. It must be created by someone else. But when I have a thought that says, well, what if it is actually that? It becomes that third alternative of, what if 1 + 1 = 3? It has no basis in what I observe. It has no foundation, no representation in the reality that I am part of. But it becomes a sort of alternative that's offered that makes my choice to affirm what is true all the more significant. So I just wanted to add that.
Jazakallah khair. Yes, please.
I don't know if this is related to your question or if it even answers it, but I think I'm just thinking of Satan as anything, because here's what naturalists imagine, right? Nature is imperfect, because you see all these faults and you see all these problems, and they imagine that if there was a creator, then the world would be perfect.
I was watching this video in which like this person was asked, do you think the world is the way God intended it to be? And that person was like, no, God intended the world to be this way. And then, we had mutations and evolution and bacteria, and that caused the world to like, descend into chaos or be the way that it is right now. And that also made me think of the question that you asked a couple of weeks ago when you were talking about like that dog who is like fully functional, who has like 4 legs, and how he like is like superior according to the laws of mechanics. So I think that like when we speak the language of naturalism, we do think that, like if there were a creator, then the world would be perfect and there wouldn't be any problems. So I think this sentence is talking about like how, because there are like problems in our social lives, problems within society, that does mean that there isn't a creator. And that is what they imagine to be like. So Satan is that imaginary thing, like bacteria or mutations that are causing, or whatever is causing a problem in our society. And they're imagining like, like how they would be able to exercise control. So I'm thinking of like how perhaps they could be thinking of like mutations or like COVID or like something like that could disrupt our bodies and their function.
Abdullah, was that a comment there?
What?
There's another thing that's bothering me here is towards the last paragraph, it says, but if you cannot be silent, do not say that seeing confusion in my species, you will be able to interfere in some way, because the order is faultless. Now, to know if the order is faultless, first I need to define what the perfect order is, because like at least in the popular argument, or again, I'm going to use the word intuitively, like we see a lot of not faultless order, especially at the level of the human race. For example, like things that the Mongols did, or like all the blood that was shed when India and Pakistan were separated, like how is this a faultless order? Like, so. Sorry, my mic was off. I can say that the order is faultless and, conclude that, because I mean, from a top-down approach, it's easy just to say that, yes, God intended and the order is faultless. But then I see a lot of not faultless order, like, with everything, the bad things the Mongols did with the Nazis, or like with the partition of India and Pakistan, all the blood that was shed. So that doesn't seem like a good order to me. Like, it's far from fault. There.
I think it's hard for us to understand what is faultless and what is full of faults, similar to the story that you often talk about in Surah Kaf. So a good example that I'd like to think of is like how the monkeys have, I think, the difference between their DNA and our DNA is it's very little,
1%, yeah.
right? And when they look at us do things and they say like we're putting them in cages, and they say this is like a lot of pain, this is maybe like, even if maybe we're trying to preserve their species or something, there are things that we cannot really truly encompass. And a lot of times it helps if you think about it personally. Have you ever found in your own life where you thought this was just a complete fault and doesn't make sense?
Pass the mic, please.
I mean, it's not faultless doesn't mean that humans can make mistakes. Humans do make mistakes, but faultless in creation is you don't see sun not going up in one day. Like the earth turns around every day. We see sun every day when there are no clouds, obviously, but there is no fault in the creation. the tree or one thing doesn't say, okay, I'm not going to obey this, or they're not saying, okay, I don't like sun going up, so the moon doesn't go away. It's like faultless in creation. You know how Truman show, like there's a light coming off from the sky. They create a environments where they make one guy believe he is in the real world, and then there is this light falling off from the sky, which is like one of the lights that enlightens the studio. So we don't experience something like that. Yes, we experience people doing bad things, but they're not faults of the creator or faults of the creation. They're faults of humans because we make mistakes. We have conscience. We have our will, and some people use that for bad things. So that's how I understand being faultless.
So if you woke up one day and the sun wasn't rising, that would be.
That would be proof of music, I guess.
Proof of what, sorry?
Doomsday.
Oops.
If something starts to act towards act against its nature, act against its laws, and it is a clear indication that there is no structure, there is no rules, there are no laws. Again, yes, our ideas about laws can change. How it changed throughout science. We thought the Earth was flat, but then we figured it's round. We can discover it's something else in the future. I'm not talking about those kind of new things. But if we experience something real against nature's creation, let's say we see moon going into sun, replacing the sun, like that kind of imagination, like that kind of, I don't want to say miracle, but fantasy, then I would say, okay, maybe moon has power over the sun, or moon is more powerful, or maybe the moon is the creator of the universe. Obviously, nothing to that kind of thing, but I'm talking about these kind of irrationalities.
But doesn't it mean like we kind of confining like God to certain laws as if he acts only in one way and he cannot act in another way?
Play with laws other than the miracles.
He doesn't? Why? He can do whatever he wants.
He can do, but he doesn't.
Huh? He's God. He can
Some
do-
being able to do something and doing something are different things. I can cook you a perfect straight line now, but I'm not doing it. I'm just trying to give an example, saying
Isn't this like we're limiting God's ability of doing things? It's like saying God cannot.
Choosing not to. We experience a constancy, not because he cannot do otherwise, but because he chooses to.
What,
Could you pass the microphone, please? Now you got to say something.
I mean, yeah, we're asserting that God can do, whatever he wants, but we don't observe, such a varying degree of possibilities, right? We might measure gravity in one place to be this certain speed and gravity in another place to be another, the same speed. It's not changing by day or hour. There is a constancy in different things. The sun generally always rises in the east for no reason except that we observe it to be that way, and we understand from that it's being chosen to rise in that direction, not that it cannot be any other possibility. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Alrighty.
So that's the thing. So if you wake up one day and the sun is rising from the west.
Well, then that the creator who has been doing it in one way for so many years, he decided another day to do it in a different way. And maybe there's a meaning behind why he chose to make it different. Maybe. I hope so.
Please.
Hold it or what? Yeah. We also have, in the context of faultless, we also need to think contextually about the accommodation of free will and free decisions. Like if you asked about the wars and the fighting and the conflicts, does that imply there's a fault there, or is it just an accommodation of free will given to humans?
But then the author here says that despite all of that, because it says humans are a confusing species, I'm assuming that's what it's referring to. But despite all that, it goes on to claim that the order is faultless. So in the order that we see, all the bloodshed, the Mongols doing what they did, the Nazis doing what they did, people murdering, this is a faultless order.
Might be addressing to the interpretation. I mean, humans are interpreting this nature as the powerful thing which has no creator. Like for some people.
So we have multiple mind participants. If they cannot hear,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it will be really disrespectful to them.
So when the author says people are confused, I guess he's referring to how people are interpreting the nature. So I can say that, oh, God is so powerful, but sun is so powerful because it gives life to this earth. But then I would be interpreting in fault. So I would be in confusion. But when I see the desert, oh, I will say the sun doesn't affect this desert. Then sun doesn't have that much power over earth. So it doesn't really give life to earth. And then I would be in confusion there too. I couldn't make my point, but
I think like for this part specifically, the author is talking specifically about like what the human race does or how humans are as a race. Yes, please.
So my point here is like going back to Abdullah, like thinking about it personally. Like, do you think you're at fault right now? Like, is your life a fault right now? Do you think that? And if you go back to the Park India war, for example, let's go there. Do you think if that had not taken place, would you still be sitting here? So I guess you can take it that way. Like, if you think your life is a fault, then maybe this thing that the author has written, it might be wrong, but you can maybe take it as a personal example to see if like the world is faultless or not. Like I would go personally, not going for Nazis or every other person.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
So I think the answer to your question is actually given later in the paragraph where it says, like right after the sentence, it says, the conditions you imagine to be confused and disorderly are transcribed with perfect order according to the book of power and divine determining. So I think that sort of like takes free will out of the equation because it does say that, you know, like even the bloodshed, Nazis, whatever, they are part of a divine determining. And then it says, for the perfect order in animals and plants, which are far inferior to us and are under our supervision, demonstrates that this seeming disorder in us is but a sort of writing. And this, I think, takes me back to when we were reading that passage a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about how you need to look at animate creatures and you need to look at their starts as well as their ends to really understand the full picture. You can't just look at something in isolation, like the Nazis killing the Jews, and be like, oh, you know, this is a fault. You have to look at the entire picture. You even have to take the Day of Judgment into consideration for us in order to understand like what was, you know, the wisdom behind that or how that thing was faultless.
Oh, I just wanted, I think maybe we should define, as you said, like before talking about something, we should define what it is. Like, what are we talking about? So how do we define order? So why for you war is something out of order? Why a human killing another human is something out of order? Like for me, for example, if I look at it, if I go and slit someone's throat and I see blood coming out, that's order. That's what is expected. No, and the person dies. Like that's still in order of like, you know, in order means it's expected. Like that's what you think we'll see. Now, for example, if you look at Nazis or like you brought the Pakistan-India war, what do you expect if, for example, some like ruthless, heartless politicians incite hatred in people, you know, and one another, and like Hindus, Muslims, whatever? What did you expect? People will slaughter each other. I mean, that's for me, that's order. Like that's when you live away from like what is, what is being like what's being taught to you by like the Quran, whatever, how you want to explain it, but like it is perfect order, I would say. Like it's some action that you could immediately see the consequence of it. So it's, I mean, at least that's if we define what order is. Yeah, it's something happens and there are consequences to it. Anyone, Abdurrahman, you wanted to say?
Just like a brief comment, because I think soon you're going to end, and then you're going to make the dua subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. And this is exactly the dua, or it's a verse. I mean, it's just the parallels are so much there, because there the angels are asking the creator, you're going to create humans onto this planet, and they're going to do bloodshed, and they're going to do all of this. Exactly what we're saying. It's like it's so much fault, so much disorder. And then the reply is subhanaka la. The reply is you do not know what I know, and then the angels say, yeah, subhanaka la ilma lana. This is how we're gonna end as well. And I liked how Nursi also, what he drops this kind of bomb of a statement saying the conditions you imagine to be confused and disorderly are transcribed with perfect order in the book of power and divine determining. And then he gives a kind of example of how we could understand this, for the perfect order in animals and plants, which are far inferior to us, are under our supervision. And so like when we look at animals and plants, we see so much order, but maybe in the perspective of an animal plant, they might see some chaos, you could say. So it's like a understanding of like maybe some humbleness or humility of how it could be, not like necessarily a conviction that, okay, now this makes so much sense of how when I see all this calamities and murders and wars, that's perfect order. It doesn't make sense to me, but I could say maybe out of humility, I can maybe see it, how it could be that way. So I saw the parallels there. And then I guess in the story of Adam going to the human, of what the purpose of Adam was he was taught all the names. He was reading the names. And in that sense, maybe that's where the order is, where the perfect fault, where it's faultless. Because otherwise, if I see a murderer or if I see a calamity in my life, it's very hard for me to say, okay, this man was just evil guy. And then or the order of things happened. And then now the calamity happened, and now someone in my family died, or I died. Like this, I don't find order there. There isn't any relief or mercy, or there isn't like order. It just seems like chaos. So I think the order of things maybe looks to the purpose of why humans were created, which is like to read the names, and maybe in the meaning side of things there can be order, but just a comment rather than like the answer.
And I think the way, again, as the paragraph that Abdurrahman mentioned and the following paragraph that comes after, the author is, I'll just read the paragraph. For the perfect order in animals and plants, which are far inferior to us and are under our supervision, demonstrates that this seeming disorder in us is but a sort of writing. It's a weird reasoning, actually, as if the claim in here is just look at the animals and plants which are inferior to us. You do observe an order in there, and you do see a apparent disorder in us. Actually, their order testifies that our disorder is actually a more, if you like, meaningful inscription. So the one, and in the next paragraph, he's also taking it as, is it at all possible that one who artistically positions one thread running through a carpet in its entirety should be other than the master designer of the carpets? Or then he gives another example, or that the one who creates a fruit should be other than the creator of the tree that bore it, so on and so forth. Let's try to see what the author is making in here. So it's saying that you're trying to just, again, in isolation, look at humanity and how they are disorganized in their behavior patterns and whatnot, and then say that this is out of order. It says, no, human is the fruit of the existence, because as if everything serves human beings, not only human beings in the sense of their physical existence, but actually the whole creation, whole existence is serving for your ibadah, your worship, so that you read the existence. This is why human is really the, if you like, crux of the existence. And then it says, but you do observe order in the rest of the existence. And now we are talking about the fruit of the whole existence, which is human. And then you say the human is disordered. How come? He says everything else is ordered. And now we are talking about the focal point of existence, or even why the whole existence is made for. And then you are saying that that human being is disordered. It doesn't make any sense. Instead, the order of the entirety of existence plus how human is situated in the existence. And when I say situated, human is created in a way to be able to read the rest of the existence and then understand their worship and then present that worship to the creator on behalf of himself. Referring back to İyyâke na'budu ve İyyâke nestaîn, human is created a khalifa in this sense. So the whole existence is ordered and human is the khalifa of that existence. And now you are saying that human is disordered. It says just the opposite. You should be saying that the apparent unorder in human is a different inscription. This is why he gives the example of a carpet, and it's not like these machinery carpet, but hand-viewed carpets. So in a hand-viewed carpet, you observe a very complex pattern. So a single thread starts from somewhere, sometimes comes out, sometimes goes underneath and whatnot. So he says, human is as if this very complex pattern, whomever is doing the rest of it is moving this most complex pattern up and down. So the order of the rest plus human's position relative to the rest of this ordered existence shows that the apparent disorder, let it be the Mongols invading somewhere, let it be the Nazis, let it be invention of, I don't know, COVID vaccine or invention of plane, which is such a beautiful tool, is all a inscription of with the pen of Qadar. So the creator is with the ups and downs of humanity is meaningfully expressing some meaning. If you cannot see it within it, just look at before and after, you will conclude about this, because I think is the pattern here.
Jazakallah khair for that beautiful comment. I think we should end it here. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر الدعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.